Hi, everybody. I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome back to the S.M.A.R.T podcast, where stands for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive learning, R for rhythmic operation, T for a thriving community, and P for performance, of course. As of today, you can find our mobile app in the Apple Store. Just look it up under the Dutch mentor, all one word, and you too can start your 15-minute per day journey to becoming the leader you always wanted to be. I would like to welcome today Cesar to our show. We're going to be talking about change management. We're going to really form it around the question of problem solving, so you can find it into the adaptive problem solving section of our podcast series. Cesar, thank you very much for being here tonight. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you're from, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm based here in San Francisco, and yeah, so what do I do? What I do is basically, my background is really originally sales and marketing. Then I moved into the enablement space, enabling sales and marketing teams, and part of that inherently required some change in tools, change in ways of operating certain playbooks, et cetera, and messaging. And so increasingly, I got more and more into change management. And I've done some leadership training as well. So I went and got my advanced degree at Chicago in organizational leadership. I worked on it for 7 years at the PhD level, and I came up with a couple of models around that to help leaders, current and emerging leaders, to how do we handle this thing called change. And you've probably heard that joke about the psychology joke of how many light bulbs or how many people does it take to change a light bulb or whatever it is. So um, it's really something where I'm applying a process, a proven process, and something that so you're not shooting from the hip when change emerges. And how are we going to handle this? Because people handle change differently, and that's really how I got into what I'm doing and to this day. And so that's where I am currently.
Excellent. Sounds like an exciting topic to talk about because it's so very, very relevant, right? I use a
Mhm.
simple formula that, high performance is the function between the technical skill and behavioral capacity. Problem solving of large and small requires a technical ability, but combined with that behavioral capacity, where too often we fall short, part of the reason why 70% of the things we set out to do never come to fruition or not to the extent that it was intended to. So dive a little deeper into what do you mean with change management, and then give us an example that you experienced on what the the feeling behind the resistance to change.
Yeah, and I'm very more of a practical approach here, and so when I'm talking about change management, most people when they say change management, they're focused on the training on particular technologies. Right. So I'm focused more myself on what's called strategic planning for change management, especially for IT change management. AI is part of IT, right? It's information technology there's many, many other tools. And so most people, when they talk about change management, usually they're referring to the training on those tools. And while that is indeed important and a good thing to do, what am my approach is more, what do you do before the actual training on the tools? Because it's not about the tools. That's why McKinsey published a research study where it said 70% of these change initiatives don't succeed. However you're defining success, apparently it wasn't adopted well. There was resistance and it wasn't get adopted, to get applied, etc. And so change management, for what I mean, has to apply more to the people side of the equation. How are we engaging with people before we actually roll out the technological change? Because there's a lot of fear around change. People's jobs, they feel threatened. Is this going to replace my job? Do I have to do this in addition to my day job? And how is this going to impact? What's in it for me? How is it going to impact me in my workload? Whatever. So a lot of these questions come up for folks as soon as you start wanting to introduce change. And so what a lot of people do is they'll show up and say, hey, we're going to roll this new solution out, whatever it is. and let's go and make it happen. But we haven't really communicated the vision, the mission, and the strategy behind that change, much less included key stakeholders and people in the business formulating that vision, mission, and strategy. That's the kind of like a co-design process, a much more inclusive approach. So that yes, it's going to be a little bit slower to do it that way, but then you're going to greatly reduce the resistance and the fear around the change a little bit further on down the line. And so that's what I mean by change management, and that's the approach of doing that. Um, what in terms of your question on the example, so one of the projects I worked on was when the client went to help somebody. It was a Salesforce related ERP, Salesforce ERP change solution, and certain stakeholders were engaged in the process, but other line leaders and departments were not engaged in the process. And so, long story short, by the time they had spent whatever it is, over $100,000 into this, or already a few months into it, they went and started to engage the department managers and line leaders. And those folks basically raised their hand and said, wait a minute, well, this is too late in the season for us. We're now in, beginning of end of Q3, beginning of Q4. It's going to be our busiest time. We can't afford the time and the risk of rolling this out right now. We're going to have to wait until the new year to do this. And so, having already invested six figures into it, halfway through the contract, basically the project got put on hold, and they realized that they really hadn't engaged these people to begin with. And so change management is really about communicating, stakeholder alignment, etc. And it's not just taking some change model that's out there and applying it. It's what do you do before that? So I developed the model, the APEE model, for strategic planning for change management.
That sounds very interesting, and I agree that it's about before you make the cookie, it is what goes into it. And we use the WIFM, right? What's in it for me? For each of the stakeholders. If there's nothing in it for me, why would I engage? Even why would I trust you? So talk a little bit about the specific steps that you recommend taking to deploy your APE framework.
Yeah, and you mentioned trust, and so yeah, that's a big thing because depending on the size of the organization, some people will trust the sponsors. The sponsors are typically the senior executives that are driving this, and we hope there's alignment at that level. But then you also need alignment at the lower levels because there are people who are maybe at the front line that may not trust the senior executives, but they trust their line leader, and so that's very important person to also engage in the process. So that's why in this APE model, the A stands for analyze and assess. And so this is where you're doing your stakeholder analysis, really determining the change impact, and certainly the readiness of the company for change. So you're really taking a step back and having a look at this and how is this going to affect what we're doing? And then really assessing how it's going to also affect meaning the workflows, and seeing what tools do we have now and how are we going to leverage this and integrate it, etc. All of those questions get answered at the analysis and assessment phase, and then prioritizing. Okay, great. Now that we've done this, what are we going to do first? Right. And then at that point, once you've done the analysis and assessment, part of this is determining which change model do you want to use. You want to use the ADKAR model from ProSide. You want to use Cotter's in N-step, 8-step model. You want to use McKinsey 7S. Whatever it is, you can then determine what to do there in the planning stage, which is the P. Planning, to me, means what are your objectives, strategies, and tactics, right? So that's where you're now engaging with more people to help. Here's what we're thinking. Here's some of the strategies. We'd like your feedback on this. Now you're getting people's voices heard in the process. And the more you get people's voices heard, guess what? The more buy-in they're going to feel into it. Well, whether you implement it or not, at least you're acknowledging that they were heard. Thank you for providing this. We understand you're looking for, you're interested in seeing this, and you're recommending this. Great. We've taken that into consideration, And then when you come back later to, actually roll it out, you can acknowledge that again and say, well, here's what, in essence, we came up with. Here's the final objectives, strategies, and tactics. And then the E is you execute on it. So you're now actually implementing that model, and you're, doing some either monthly and or quarterly reviews to determine, what kind of feedback are we getting. That's where the evaluation piece comes in, is how is this landing? What's the adoption rate? Obviously, you've also built out some RACI models as to, who's going to be responsible, right, accountable, supportive of this, and consulted and informed, etc. So you have those key people, players, as you're executing on it. And then you're evaluating, like I said, based on what's working, what isn't working. And then after that, the final E is exit and evolve. That you've gathered and done some further feedback surveys to see what do we learn from this that worked, and what did we learn that didn't work, so that we can, next time we go to change, we can apply that. Because you only get so many coins of trust, and it's so easy. It takes a long time to build that spiritual, or not spiritual, but trust account with your coins, but so fast to burn through it. You say the wrong thing and you starts questioning your level, the trust that you have in the person. So it takes time to build that, and doing it correctly and thoroughly will really help to continue that. So the next time you go to do a change process, you won't get that, oh God, here we go again, the eyes rolling and all those kind of things that people will want, and then which in turn will increase the lack of adoption and the resistance to manage that process. So that's what the APEE model is, and you can pretty much execute on that in like a 90-day approach and program.
Excellent. So yeah, for example, in my smart mobile app, I promote more the A3 thinking, and very similar to the APPE. It is the key to what you are talking about. It's key stakeholders, what's in it for them, building trust, making sure that you are not telling them what to do, but they're engaged in that. So let's say this goes well, right? And you're finally into the measurement and evaluation stage. Or you run into problems early on. There is this one key stakeholder that continues to be a resistor or a late adopter. And so how do you act, how can you resolve those issues around those people who just continue to be resistant to kind of change, but they hold a key piece of the puzzle?
Sure. That's when you break out the whip. No, obviously you do have the carrot and the stick, right? But the idea there is, before you start trying to resolve it, I think we need to really seek first to understand, right? The whole Covey thing. And you really want to understand is, who is the stakeholder? What is their level of influence? And eventually, of course, trying to find out through open conversation as to what is behind that resistance. You want to find out why, but you don't want to ask why. Because when you ask people, why are you resisting this? That's just going to make people dig in even further. You just want to understand, you want to say that I would like to understand, what's happening here around here. We noticed this. Can you tell us a little bit more about the reason for your resistance around this, et cetera, right? And so then, depending on that level, and depending on the level of influence, because people have influence way beyond just their title, right? You can have somebody at a lower level that has great influence versus somebody at a higher level in terms of the title. So we want to determine that earlier than later, so that we can get the person on board. And typically we do have work with and identifying internal champions who are helping to facilitate this change. Because if I'm going to come in and help with the change, they don't know who I am. It's going to take me a little bit of time to build some trust and rapport, but there are key people that they already know, like, and trust within the organization. So those are the ones we want to leverage as the change champions, in addition to just the sponsors, right? And so that's how you really work with this, to understand what's behind any of the resistance, and then having the conversation with people that they may know, like, and trust, so that we can have them to either, is there something we didn't do correctly? Is there something we need to adjust? And so we can go ahead and adjust that, taking into considerations this person's reason for the resistance, adjust it, and then move forward with it, and then get everybody on board, so we're all rowing in the same direction.
I love the influencer piece of the puzzle because it is important. The second one is that we really want to roll things out into full-fledged development in the organization, but we want to test it out. Right? During the testing cycle is not a great opportunity to find who's with me, who is not. So let's say we have had success. You overcame the problem with the late adopter or the resistor. We're now chugging along. Uh, what is the mindset you establish with the team itself on continuous development? So you set early
Yes.
targets. How do you set that mindset of continuous growth and development of whatever project you work?
Well, it's an excellent question because change is constant. It
Mm-hmm.
is one of the few constants. And so you have to continuously improve in order to keep up with the change. And so that's still going to come back. Part of initially I mentioned about the change readiness of the company is what is the culture of the company? Are we really ready for change? And do we have the mindset of continuous improvement mindset? Do we have people on the team that are willing to put on the effort? We see this happening in professional sports today. I'm a 49er fan, and we see some people who haven't shown up for training in a month. It's been in the news, right? So, I mean, this is the same thing in business. It's like, what, as a leader, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to really, you know, drive that culture of mindset of continuous change. And of course, you will need some coaching around that. You'll need to do some yourself as a leader. You need to coach and guide others, you know, so that they trust you and that they see, okay, we're aligned with this leader's vision and mission here. And so it takes, you know, it does take a bit of work to get that in place, but what you say is super important to get that because, again, the change is a constant. We're continually having to evolve and go to the next level because what got you here won't get you there.
Exactly right. So with that said, where can people find you, Cesar?
LinkedIn, Cesar Viana Teague. I'm very active there as well. Welcome to connect, message me, or my website is changeisgood.io.
Very good.
Changeisgood.io. Welcome to message me.
Excellent. And that will be in the show briefing on the back end as well. So leave us with a parting thought.
Happy holidays, and make sure that your change is good.
Yeah, I always say that we need to be at the leading edge of change. Don't let change nip you in the butt. Right? It is that a good growth mindset as an emerging leader is the way to not only survive but thrive, and that's spot on. Cesar, thank you very much for sharing your insights and your APPE approach to problem solving and getting people to come together. And you are 100% right. It is about cultivating the soil before you dive into a project, having the key stakeholders around the table and really understanding what's in it for them, uh, using the right influences. I think you can be very successful as well. Thank you again for joining the show today. And to the
Thank you.
audience, again, thank you for being here. Share this with your folks, like, follow, subscribe. There will be lots of topic ahead of in the next weeks to come that will help you expand your brain, your mind, your personal growth and development as an emerging leader. Thank you, and we'll talk to everybody soon again. Have a great evening, everybody.